Scenes from a Writer's Life. Ruskin Bond. A Memoir. Narrated by Rajiv, Dadia. Acknowledgements. Dr. Howard Gottlieb, Director of Boston University's Special Collections Library, for enabling me to use the correspondence in notes and letters. Anuradha Dutt of Penguin Books India for her editorial help. The BBC for its abridged version of the chapter The Playing Fields of Shimla, broadcast during its India 1997 season. I think it may have been bad luck that your first book came to you so early, making a long wait afterwards inevitable. But that doesn't invalidate the first book. The Room on the Roof remains just what it always was, a remarkably true piece of writing. Than which, what more could anyone ask for? Your snag is, surely, that you are a writer who works best from very close to your own experience, which means that one is terribly dependent on the nature of one's experience. Only so much that is of general validity happens to one, and only so much of what happens to one strikes down to the level from which one writes. I sometimes feel very envious of people with the other kind of mind, full of invention, but I still like best the kind of writing which goes inwards rather than outwards. Diana Athill in a letter to the author, 23rd March 1964. Preamble, Prelude, Prologue. Few people bother to read forewords, introductions, or prefaces, and I can't say I blame them. The very names are off-putting. Like speeches, they are best left to die away on the wind. For in cold print, all that fine rhetoric looks uninviting and indigestible. I don't know of anyone who reads volumes of speeches, and I have yet to meet someone who has read the introductions to the world's classics. So why read mine? I shall be crafty and call it something else. The reader may be surprised to know that this is the first time I am attempting straight autobiography. True, the autobiographical element is present in much of my work, but there is really more fiction in my fiction than the reader may realize. That dramatic escape from Java, those supernatural experiences, and the close encounters with bears, leopards, and amorous pythons have a certain verisimilitude because I have used the first person and taken the trouble to make the backgrounds and episodes convincing. I'm no Baron Munchausen, but sometimes I have given rein to my imagination, although in a perfectly credible way. According to my mother, my grandfather did keep a number of interesting pets, and I have described them and their activities in some of my tales. But I have not tried to emulate him in this respect. Visitors to my small flat in Mussoorie are sometimes disappointed to find that there are no flying foxes hanging from the ceiling or white mice peeping out from under the cushions. Mukesh, a member of my family, did on one occasion bring home a guinea pig, and we kept it for a few days. But guinea pigs, like their relatives the rabbits, evacuate their food as rapidly as they consume it, which is all day, and cleaning up the mess is a full-time job. We gave the guinea pig to one of the many NGOs that are sprung up on the hillside. They were looking for a fundraising mascot. I love animals, but their bowel movements are somewhat different from ours, and they were never meant to live in an author's bedroom, library, or clothes cupboard. Their true home is in the wild, where they can enrich the soil rather than the carpet. So the reader who comes to this book looking for my fictional persona will be disappointed. I'm not an eccentric recluse who converses with rhesus monkeys. I do not care for rhesus monkeys. They invade my rooms, wreck the telephone, raid the kitchen, and fling my geraniums out of the window. No, I am like any other normal human being who pays his taxes and curses when the lights go out. The first 21 years of my life form the period covered by this memoir. Although for most of us, these are not years of great achievement, they are the formative years and the most emotional, impressionable, vulnerable years. There are struggles, setbacks, failures, but hope and optimism have not been blighted, and the cynicism of middle age is yet far distant. I was still a pimply adolescent when I decided I wanted to be a writer. I had read Dickens's David Copperfield and Hugh Walpole's Fortitude and decided that I wanted to be like the writer heroes of both books. Before that, my father had brought me up on a diet of the children's classics as well as other forms of entertainment, and although I was only 10 when he died, the seed had been sown and I had begun to dream. The ensuing lonely period with my mother and stepfather only cemented my attachment to the world of books. They were the great escape, and as I grew out of my teens, I began to love the country that I had till then taken for granted, to love it, through the friends I made and through the mountains, valleys, fields and forests which had made an indelible impression on my mind. For India is an atmosphere as much as it is a land, with the result that no sooner had I set foot in the West than I wanted to return to India and to all that I had known and loved. It was only by going away that I came to the realization that I would never go away again, no matter what happened. This was where I belonged, and this was where I would stay, come flood or fury. So this is the story of two journeys. One, to the point where I had found a publisher for my first book and could confidently say, I am an author. And the other, to the point where I had resolved most of my inner conflicts and could confidently say, I am an Indian, in the broadest, all-embracing, all-Indian sense of the word. Being a child of changing times, I had grown up with divided loyalties, but at the end of the journey I had come to realize that I was blessed with a double inheritance, and I was determined to make the most of it. If it were not for the family that has grown up around me, making me a prisoner of love, I doubt if I would have remained rooted to one place for so long, Mussoorie and its surroundings. In 1970, there came Prem and his young wife. Then their children, Rakesh, Mukesh and Savitri. Rakesh grew up and married, and he and Beena presented us with two delightful youngsters, Siddharth and Shrishti. So there is no escape. I have become a family man by virtue of remaining a bachelor. In many ways, this is the ideal situation for a writer. All the noise, merriment, and bedlam of a large family living together has become an integral part of my own life, and for the most part, it's joy to my heart and music to my ears. And for me, it makes up for the lonely childhood years when I felt distanced from family and could find happiness only in the homes of friends or between the covers of books. The painful but sometimes pleasurable process of growing up and becoming a writer is described in these pages. Ruskin Bond. Chapter 1. Life with Father. During my childhood and early boyhood with my father, we were never in one house or dwelling for very long. I think the tennis bungalow in Jamnager, in the grounds of the Ram Vilas Palace, housed us for a couple of years, and that was probably the longest period. In Jamnagar itself, we had at least 3 abodes, a rambling, leaking old colonial mansion called Cambridge House, a wing of an old palace, the Lal Bagh, I think it was called, which was also inhabited by bats and cobras, and the aforementioned tennis bungalow, a converted sports pavilion which was really quite bright and airy. I think my father rather enjoyed changing houses, setting up home in completely different surroundings. He loved rearranging rooms too, so that this month's sitting room became next month's bedroom, and so on. Furniture would also be moved around quite frequently, somewhat to my mother's irritation, for she liked having things in their familiar places. She had grown up in one abode, her father's Dehra house, whereas my father hadn't remained anywhere for very long. Sometimes he spoke of making a home in Scotland, besides Loch Lomond, but it was only a distant dream. The only real stability was represented by his stamp collection, and this he carried around in a large tin trunk, for it was an extensive and valuable collection. There was an album for each country he specialized in: Greece, Newfoundland, British possessions in the Pacific, Borneo, Zanzibar, Sierra Leone. These were some of the lands whose stamps he favored most. I did share some of his enthusiasm.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?